Hi, everybody. It's Nancy Reyes with For Your Canine.
Lisa Bataska with Canine Defined.
Today, we have a special guest on our special edition Facebook Live. So let us know you're there. I know it's an odd time for us to do a Facebook Live, but I think it's you'll be pleasantly surprised. Today, we have with us Mike Shikashio. He is, for all intents and purposes, the aggression expert in the dog training world. And so we wanted to kind of bring him on and to talk a little bit more about aggression and reactivity, which are pretty big topics for us. We usually talk about them quite a lot. And we also, as trainers, work with them quite a lot. So we wanted to kind of bring in an expert on the topic and get more clarification. So let us know you're there. If you have any questions or anything like that, please pop them into the chat, and we'd be happy to answer them. So, Mike, and tell us a little bit about how you got into this craziness and how you started in working with aggressive dogs.
Sure. Kind of started out like a lot of trainers end up starting out is either like shelter, rescue, foster kind of stuff. So that was my thing, is doing a lot of fostering for lab and Doberman rescues. And so, but as a lot of foster people know, they start sending you more and more difficult dogs as you become more and more experienced foster. Like, oh, they know what they're doing. They won't like accidentally let a dog out, or they know how to manage multiple dogs. So, which means you start getting more and more difficult cases where you have to really try to help the dogs. And it's kind of that responsibility is on you as the foster sometimes, especially if they're like, they know you want to be a trainer. And that's what else, like what better way to help dogs than to learn how to work with aggression and help with the behavior problems. So actually wasn't really trying to get into aggression. It just came naturally because of
Mhm.
that need. But then I took a deep dive. I actually found that I loved working with dogs who have aggression issues because I found the most kind of reward also on saying, we can help this dog that's usually just frightened of things or stressed out about a particular situation, help them feel better and stay in the home and not get surrendered to the rescue and shelter in the first place. So that's how it all started. And then I started like learning more about training and behavior and starting my own business part-time. And that grew into the full-time business. And that grew into only taking aggression cases. And that grew into speaking and traveling and lecturing about how to help aggression in dogs and talking to trainers and veterinarians and shelter staff around the world. So it's been a great journey. And I would have never thought I would have been in this position now, but here I am. So
Yeah. Well, no, and it's such a common tale, right? All of us, most of us that start in dog training or start working with aggression, it's basically because you've had a couple of successes, and then people just keep sending you dogs and keep sending you the hard cases, and yes, it's actually pretty rewarding once when you are able to help, which is again one of the purposes of this of the Facebook Live, right, is to help people learn better and have better relationship with their dogs. And again, mostly all of us, they want to keep the dogs in the home, right? Because and even still, with everything that all the hard work everybody does, lots of dogs get surrendered
yeah.
every year to the shelter. So that's a tough gig. Um, so I wanted to talk a little bit about I'm going to go back to the foundation. Like, what is aggression and
Right.
what is reactivity? I know that sounds really basic, but I think the words are those words are not used really properly all the
Mhm.
time. So it's really important that people understand what aggression is, because I cannot tell you how many times we've had people come and say, "Oh yeah, my dog's aggressive," and it's like, not really aggressive, right? It's not that, right? So what is in your what definition, or how do you, and I hate using labels, but how do what's aggression, what's reactivity?
Yeah, I think it's a really important question because aggression is really misunderstood a lot, and it has a lot of it's a very loaded word when you think about it. Aggression, or that person's aggressive, that dog's aggressive, or and it can create a lot of problems because then there's this label, as you said, Nancy, that's put on the dog. It's like a sign, is that's their personality trait. It kind of like puts a red X on them, like this dog is bad in some ways. But for me,
Mhm.
aggression is just behavior. It's normal behavior where every person and every dog is capable of it. And it's part of their behavior repertoire, meaning We use it to help us survive or to stay safe or to get us out of a situation where we feel threatened. Very normal behavior. We use it to keep access to things we value, like our house or our, our money or our wallet, and we lock our doors at night or lock our car doors or hold our wallet a little closer when we're walking down a busy street. That's resource guarding, right? So it's
Right.
very normal behavior. So for me, aggression is just behavior. It's used to, the classic definition I use, it's behavior used to increase distance from or eliminate a threatening stimulus. So the dog or person is simply using their behavior to say, I need this thing to go away. I want it to go away because I feel threatened by it. I don't feel safe by it, or it's threatening my resources. So if you think about it that way, then it's normal. Like people think, well, of course I would do the same thing if I was being threatened by somebody or somebody was, holding a weapon towards me. I would probably show some aggression to defend myself. So that's how I define aggression or aggressive behavior. And then reactivity for me, it's sort of I have a controversial way of defining it, but for me, all dogs are reactive. Every single dog on the planet is reactive. Every person on the planet is reactive. If not, they wouldn't be living, right? Because we're all reacting to stimuli in our environment all the time. So it's a reaction. Now, that sounds like a cop-out, so I'll kind of go a little bit further into it. Typically, when somebody says, oh, I've got a reactive dog, their dog's displaying those barking, lunging, on leash kind of behaviors. They might be pulling towards something, whining. They're showing more intense behaviors towards a particular stimulus. But maybe there's no bite history. But for me, that can get us into problems too, because it might also soften what might be needed to be taken more seriously. So I'm like, oh, I've got a reactive dog. Can you take a reactive dog case? And a trainer might be like, yeah, sure. I work with reactive dogs all the time. But then you get the history. Maybe that dog's really injured a person, sent them to a hospital, or really injured another dog. And they're labeling it reactive just as a kind of a nicer way of describing the dog.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't really help us help the dog, because we need to know exactly what's happening in the case, how risky it is, what kind of safety precautions we need to take. So, but I get why people want to use the term reactive. I mean, they want to also not label their dog as aggressive. So, so if as a consultant or a trainer working on cases, I always recommend, you can hear the labels, but don't put a picture in your mind until you get into the details of the case. Right.
Until you really
aggression, whether you call it reactivity, whether you call the dog being stubborn, any label you want to throw at it. Just for us as trainers and consultants, we need to know, what the dog is doing, and that's gonna allow us to help the dog most.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's really people just putting a lot of labels on different things, and it's really challenging because, and then we also get the opposite, Mike. Oh, my dog's aggressive, really aggressive, and it's really not. So we have to ask a series of questions to be able to figure out, okay, what's really going on there and what's really happening. So when can you talk a little bit about aggression towards dogs versus aggression towards humans? I think a lot of people fear that if a dog is aggressive, aggressive, that they're going to bite people too.
Yeah.
They really, for whatever reason, they make that jump, right? That it's like if a dog attacks a dog, it's going to bite a person.
Yeah, I mean it's a really valid concern for people to think, and I'm glad, some of my clients think that way. Because they get a little bit more concerned about safety and management. But aggression typically doesn't go cross species, meaning if the dog has a history of attacking other dogs or guarding their resources towards other dogs, they guard their bone or their resting spot, it doesn't mean it's going to go cross species, meaning, oh, suddenly this dog's going to attack humans and cats and rabbits and everything else. Now, that being said, some of the motivations, it doesn't matter what the species is. It doesn't matter if the thing's even living. The dog might show aggression towards it because, let's use an example, pain, right? So if a dog has hip dysplasia, wouldn't matter if it's another dog landing on its hip or a person touching the hip or a broomstick accidentally falling on the dog's hip. The dog's going to respond, saying, I need this thing to go away, whatever it is, because it's causing me pain. So there are cases where you do have to consider it's going to happen to anything or anyone. And then there's other cases where it's not common to see that go cross species. A dog that's fearful of other dogs, for instance, like lack of socialization around other dogs. Of course, it's not going to mean, oh, no, I'm also going to be fearful of people, right? So it depends on the underlying motivation for me in determining, is it going to jump from one species to the next? But typically, you don't have to worry much. It's rare to see that, with the exception, of course, those other things. Now, we could also talk about things like traits or behavioral traits where there's a higher tendency to do certain things. Like you might look at terriers and tenacity, right? So if they are going to display aggression, you might see a higher, faster, intense response. And I'm just generally speaking there. Each dog is, of course, unique. You might see some terriers being really slow at doing things and some mastiffs being really fast at doing things. So sometimes you have these anomalies in the breeds, but yeah, you can you have to consider also breed specific characteristics when it comes to aggression. But most of the time, again, don't worry about the cross species jump. Your dog that's got issues with cats is not going to maul you in your sleep, in other words.
Right. So going back to some of the pain issues, do you require, because I know we do, like if we, depending on the history that we get, sometimes do you require for them to have a full medical if
Mhm.
something kind of catches your eye?
Definitely. I think out of all types of behavior issues, aggression is one of the ones we have to work very closely with veterinarians with. So I always recommend to trainers and my students, form those relationships with veterinarians, especially the ones that are have an interest in behavior. It's kind of the operative phrase to use if you're looking to make connections with vets, call the practice manager and be like, do you have anybody that has a specialty or an interest in behavior? Sometimes you have people that like training, so they have a little bit of that information about what to look for. But yeah, pain is, it's tragic to see dogs that are not diagnosed with pain issues, but their behavior is a direct result of that pain, and then somebody blames it, or a group of people sometimes blame it on something else, like the dog's being dominant, or the dog is being stubborn, or it's just something was wired wrong, or they blame it on the dog where it's clearly a pain issue. And then I've seen cases where there's many professionals missing it. The veterinarian's not seeing it, the trainer in the case is not seeing it, the owner's not seeing it, so nobody's seeing this pain. So and the worst though is when those dogs are then subjected to punishment in the name of
Yes,
training. Like, oh
right.
no, that dog's being dominant, so now we have to pin it down or yell at it or do X, Y, or Z, which then sometimes exacerbates the pain, which then creates this really vicious cycle. So I think it's so important to learn how to recognize, and when in doubt, just go to the vet. Just do a good thorough
Mhm.
exam, get that blood work done, get that physical done, get the movement, look at get somebody that
Movement.
knows what to look at for movement.
Mhm.
Dog sports people are good at that usually. A
Yes,
lot of
yeah.
times.
Well,
So
and
yeah.
it's true because like we usually I look at movement, and if
Mhm.
sometimes if the dog doesn't want to sit or doesn't want to lie down or some real simple things like that
Exactly.
that sometimes are like, okay, that's weird. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
anything that catches your attention,
And it becomes really obviously when you start to look at the case, because you start asking, oh, they'll start to make the correlation, like, yeah, he's been getting up a little more slowly from his bed, or he's been wanting to he goes into the ring a little less enthusiasm now, but he seems okay. Like he goes to the dog park all day, or he goes to daycare, and he's fine there, and then he has
hmm
problems here, and then we're like, well, when did he start biting you? And they're like, well, it was 3 months ago when he started to get up more slowly, when he started to go in the ring more slowly, and it just all ties together. But it can be sometimes not obvious, right?
hmm
So, yeah, when in doubt, always look for pain and medical issues in aggression cases. It's by far one of the most common things that goes missing in solving these cases.
which is interesting because that's the first place I look, because it's
Mhm.
really hard to throw a lot of training at a dog if the dog's not feeling well or it's got some stuff going on.
Mhm.
It's very frustrating for all involved when
Yeah.
that happens.
Yes. Yes.
So I have a question for you, Michael. What
Sure.
about one of the things, because we were talking before, and I have questions because I'm always interested, and you've been able to travel to different countries, and the dog atmosphere is very different, right,
Mhm.
in different places and so forth. I guess I'm always curious because in the US, right, there's no really governing body over trainers.
Mhm.
So anyone can open up, shop and have no behavior history, but still train dogs and stuff like that. What are your findings in other countries in terms of, we were talking like, is there governing bodies, right, that can see that? Because I don't think people realize, like, just because somebody's a trainer doesn't necessarily mean they are equipped to handle specific cases.
Yeah, I think it's an issue worldwide. There's very few countries that actually require any kind of licensing or regulation of trainers. Germany does require trainers to pass a test. Now, it's set up where there's different schools and different places you can take the test, and they have different levels. The test has to be looked at by the veterinary boards there, where they're like, okay, this is a satisfactory test. So they're actually a little bit different depending on where you take the test, but some of them are very thorough. Like I was impressed just how in deep into the
Mhm.
knowledge somebody needs to have. So that being said, I do find that when you have more laws in place governing not only just training but what people do with their dogs, you're going to see
Mhm.
less issues. Switzerland's a perfect example. They have laws about a lot of stuff, but you see, one of their interesting things I saw there was the reporting laws. So if a dog, like say, dog bites a human in the United States, and in a lot of jurisdictions, it's going to vary state by state. But if the person goes to the hospital, that doctor is supposed to report that bite. Now, they don't always do that. They don't even always know to do that. But by law, they're supposed to say, okay, this dog bit somebody and I have to report it to animal control. In Switzerland, they have to report, even the veterinarians have to report dog to dog bites, which is, I
Nice.
was just like,
Interesting.
whoa. So it's
Wow.
very good tracking of all the dog bites to both humans and dogs. And in that regard, creates more accountability and responsibility. I think they're very responsible just in general. There's just the different culture of responsibility for both ways. Like people know I can't just go up and touch every single dog. Like here in the US and some other countries, there's an expectation. Oh, I don't pet your dog. And here's my magical hand and sniff my hand
Yeah.
tapping. Right. You
True.
see that all the time here.
Yes,
Yes.
we
But
do.
in other countries,
Well,
there's that expectation's not there. In fact, it's so you see it. It's loved here. Even the children, they're taught, don't bother the
yes.
dog.
It's a
Leave the dog
different culture.
alone. Either ask permission or just ignore all the dogs. So what happens is the dogs just become very well adapted to that environment, and there's a lot more freedoms of movement there on the dogs, meaning they can go to restaurants. You see dogs inside restaurants.
Mhm.
You don't have to ask permission. It's normal. Like nobody's like, oh my gosh, there's a dog here, I have to go pet it and say hello. It is like normal to see them. And so public transportation, I mean, you just see
Yeah.
so many more options. So yeah, I think regulation of the trainers helps, but I think it's a little bit of everything. Just
Yeah.
society, how
Yeah.
they treat the
Just
dogs,
society in general.
cultural norms, the amount of socialization they'll get, the good breeding practices. You don't see the mass number of puppy mills we might have here in the U.S., for instance.
Mhm.
Where they're getting dogs from, you don't see this mass importation of dogs from other countries that are coming from very difficult situations. Not that there's anything, of course, wrong with rescuing dogs, but we have to consider how it's impacting behavior and genetics and the gene pool, and all those things are all considerations. So, yeah, I find it's a fascinating question because I think there's so many. It's not just one thing. It's just a
Mhm.
Just
combination of
everything.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like severity of aggression, you go to some countries, dog that bites. Some of the cases we see here in the U.S., they were like, oh yeah, dog bite and level 3 punctures or something like that. Different levels of bites. We're like, oh yeah, okay. But for us, it's like, okay, just it just becomes part of our culture where that's normal. In other countries, it's like,
Not
no,
tolerated.
no, not at all. Some places would
Mhm.
not tolerate that at all. So, yeah.
Hmm.
And and I think the other thing too, like with working with aggression,
Mhm.
and I think the true aggression, not like some of the stuff you've described to me is like, yeah, I can see people calling it aggression, like resource
Mhm.
guarding and stuff like that. But do I consider that aggression personally? No. I mean, not real aggression. Like to me, real aggression is where there's fights and somebody's getting hurt, whether it's another dog or a person.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of talked about the loosely
Yeah,
used.
it's interesting. Yeah, it's and again, it's a matter of however you want to call it, right? And for me, it's all aggressive behavior. If the function of that behavior is to increase distance from or eliminate a threat, and
Sure.
that's so whether the dogs are fighting or whether there's a little growl from a dog that's growling their food ball, it's still for me falls into that umbrella of technically it's what's called agonistic behavior because you might see conflict avoidance behaviors in that much bigger umbrella. So aggressive behaviors are in there, but for me, it's all behavior. So,
Hmm.
and when you think about it, it's relative to what people think they have a problem with. So somebody might have a dog that, let's say it's a livestock guardian dog that barks at the fence line towards people walking by the property, right? And like, oh my gosh, this is so bad. I can't have this. And then you have somebody else that I love that my dog does this because that's their job,
Yes.
right? They're protecting the property. So but the dog's doing the exact same thing in either case. It's just a matter of person's perspective. So what I'm called in for sometimes is like, am I here to fix your perspective or is it to fix? I'm using air quotes there. Fix the
Right.
dog. And most of the time, it's somewhere in between. You're helping explain to that person that it's quite normal for the Great Pyrenees to park at the fence line. You're not going to get rid of that. I mean, it's normal for
Right. It
a
would
dog.
be tough.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we had a question. Katie asks, when do you consider an aggression case solved? That's a really good question. I know we all
Yeah.
have different what we feel is fixed, if you will.
Yep. Yeah, so we have to be again more on the word choice, right? So I actually have something in my contract that states that we never fix. So I actually use that word
Right.
fix aggressive behavior. The reason why is because it's normal. So if people ask me, I want my dog to never bite again, I'll say that's fine. Can you hold your breath for the rest of your life? It's like never breathe again because it's a normal behavior.
Right.
So
Right.
it's can you never blink again? So it's when people have that, I have to help them shift their mindset that your dog's going to defend themselves if they feel threatened enough. Any dog might do that, to
Mhm.
a certain
Hmm.
degree. Any person might do that to a certain degree. So we never actually solve it or fix it. What we do though is reduce the dog's need to go to using those behaviors because we're helping them feel safer. We're addressing the underlying pain or medical issues they might have. We're keeping people from petting the dog when the dog doesn't want to be pet. We're keeping the kids away from the food bowl while the dog's eating. But we can also help change that to some extent and help the dog feel safer. When the kid comes walking by the food bowl, we can help to change that association. But if we push that dog enough,
Hmm.
it's going to go right back to what it knows. Like, I need to protect this food because I'm super hungry and this kid's really bothering me, right? So I kind of make it that understanding that our goal is to reduce the frequency of it. Let's reduce the frequency of it. Let's reduce the intensity of it. Let's help this dog feel safer. And ultimately, that's going to solve most cases because we're getting to that goal through good management and through helping that dog feel safer. So that's kind of how I address that question,
Hmm.
and also making sure I never offer guarantees. Right,
Right.
not a light switch. We're not going in
No.
to fix a dishwasher.
Right.
We're dealing with a sentient being with behavior that's going to fluctuate depending on all of the other complex variables. So it's really important to understand that. Like it's not a
Mm, yeah.
fix. There's no fix or solving.
And we do sometimes caution people, any trainer, because any trainer that says they can guarantee to fix anything or
Mhm.
fix any behavior issue is you got to really ask more questions and just really think about it, because it's like, I mean, I know I've been doing this a long time. There's no way I can guarantee
Yeah.
that I'm going to fix the problem. We are going to work on
Right.
it and give them the best solution, but there's no way
Mhm.
I can guarantee a thing.
Exactly. And I think that's the issue too with social media is that people see videos of a
Mhm.
dog barking and lunging and somebody fixing it, again, air quotes there, doing
Yeah.
something like hanging the dog up or whatever, these awful techniques. And it looks like it works because, yeah, the dog
Mhm.
will stop the
Stops the
behavior
behavior.
if they're being choked or if there's a high enough aversive stimulus, presented to them. They're going to stop what they're doing in that moment. right?
Mhm.
So then it looks like it's fixed, and people are like, "Oh my gosh, it's amazing! The dog stopped barking and lunging." But it doesn't mean the dog's never going to bark and lunge again. The dog's gonna be like, "Next time
Right.
I get the opportunity, I'm
Yeah.
gonna let this person that's doing this to me know that's how inappropriate it is." So it's
Right.
it's
And
um,
and some folks, some breeds too, um, with that punishment or hanging or whatever. Some dogs, some breeds will, dogs specifically, will tolerate better than others. I think
Mhm.
um,
mhm,
back in the 70s when the Dobermans were labeled as aggressive, or they turn, I used to hear that all the time when I was a kid. They turn on their owners. It was back then the Keeler methods was what they used, and
mhm.
I think the Dobermans were like, yeah, no, don't don't do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, because they're really Dobermans. You can see my Doberman in the background
Yeah,
there. They're
Mhm.
just big softies, really.
they
They're just
are.
sensitive little souls.
Weenies.
You can imagine when you start doing not so nice things. So they're
Yeah.
actually less tolerant than a lot of other
Yes.
breeds.
Yeah. Well,
So
yeah, because they are kind of and they're very, they have a
yeah,
lot of big feelings, and
hmm,
they're very soft and squishy dogs. But yeah, and then when they're threatening them. I mean, granted, now that's true for any breed. It's just that
yeah,
at that time, the Dobermans were just very popular
yeah,
during that
yeah,
time,
yep,
right? So
yep,
that's why you heard about that more often than not. But that was a very interesting. I remember that. I'm like, and then, and then
yeah.
once you get to know the breed, you're like,
Every decade has its stigma
yes.
dog, right? It goes from Dobermans, then Rottweilers and German Shepherds and
Mhm.
Pit Bulls
Yeah,
now,
but the
and
pit bulls unfortunately have stayed pretty
Yeah.
popular for a long time, so that's
yeah,
kind of,
yeah.
well, the Malinois starting to edge in on that now.
True.
Mm.
True. At least in the dog training world, I think we've seen a lot more in dog sports and dog training.
Yeah,
Malinois.
yeah, yeah.
Saw that a lot in Europe.
Yeah,
They're very popular right now.
yeah. So, another question, Lauren asked, how do you differentiate dominance that may be labeled as aggression, or vice versa, that behaviors would differentiate the two? Because yeah, the whole dominance thing,
Yeah.
that's a
So I should define a couple terms there again, because
yeah.
dominance is a very hot or
Mhm.
controversial term. Some trainers don't believe in dominance at all. But dominant behavior does exist in the animal world. Exists in many species. It is a thing, and it typically is defined as priority. Which animal gets priority access to a resource? Although you might see dominant behaviors used in other contexts. You might see it ritualized during play. You see like the dog doing the head over or the paw over the other dog's back. Things like that. So dominant behaviors are used in that negotiation. So you might actually put them under a larger umbrella, not under aggression. So aggression, the function is to, remember, increase distance from or eliminate a provocative or threatening stimulus, where dominant behaviors are used to negotiate access to a resource. Resources could include, of course, territory, access to mating rights if you're in countries where they don't have a lot of spaying and neutering. So that's the difference between the two. So I don't use the term, you might have heard this label, dominance aggression, or
Mhm.
dominance aggression. I don't use that term. Um, the newest label that's given by the veterinary behaviors is called conflict control aggression. And people were still kind of equating that with like a dominance thing. But for me, it's not. It's conflict control aggression is actually kind of the opposite. It's like a dog that's confused. So they're using their aggressive behavior or behaviors to control the environment because they're worried about what their person might do, because that person's so unpredictable. So if you think about somebody that comes home and yells at their dog one day because they're mad about something else, and then they come home and give their dog treats, and the next day, same thing, it becomes this really awkward, unpredictable person. Then the dog's be like, you know what? The only way I can control my environment is to start barking and lunging first, or try to bite first, because that will usually get the person to stop or start to control my environment more. So that's where you see that, where it can look like what people would label as like the dog trying to control the world, right?
Mhm. Right.
But they're just doing it out of a state of insecurity and anxiety. They're like, this person's really, my person is, I don't know what to expect from day to day. Sometimes they yell, sometimes they're doing this. They're not consistent. They give me treats sometimes. What is going on? So it builds this anxiety. It's super rare to see a dog use behaviors to gain access to a resource that they don't already have possession of. So, in instance, the dog that is like, I see your treat pouch over there, and you're wearing it. I'm going to take it.
Yeah.
Super,
Yeah.
super rare, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I hope
Some
that
might
kind of
just
defines those two loosely.
yeah. Well, no, and that's really because that's everybody's so dominance and this and that and we
Yeah.
it seems like we've kind of come away from it because it's like dogs aren't trying to dominate you all the time. You know what I mean? They're just
Yeah.
people just it's like oh you see what he
Yeah,
did?
I think
He's trying to
the issue
dominate.
really came when trainers started to use it
Yeah.
as an excuse for aversive techniques. So you have to be dominant, you have to be the alpha, which came, of course, from the old wolf studies that have been now talked about in great detail about why we shouldn't be calling dogs alphas or using that term. So, and then the trainers started to use, the dominance based
Mhm.
method of training, which is totally, like, when you think about it, doesn't make sense at all if you study dogs and how they exist in the world with us, right?
Right.
So,
So, Lauren, circling back to that, so you might see a dog react to another dog's dominance with aggression if they don't read the dog correctly. Well, and
mhm.
Mike, you can just, I don't think that the other dog's trying to be dominant. It's like there's a conflict over something. So,
Well, you might see a dominant behavior. So a dog
right,
using a dominant behavior, and the other dog's like, I don't. They might actually be reading it correctly. So it could be a conflict, and you might have two dogs saying, "We both want this bone." So I'm
right.
going to put my head over your back, and the other dog's like, "No, you're not. I'm going to put my arm over your back," and of course the conflict ensues. So they're using dominant behaviors, and then so it's going to end up resulting in somebody's going to get access to that bone, and sometimes it results in more overt conflict.
Hmm.
But it's so I would instead of saying dogs dominant, I would just replace dominant with dominance with dominant behavior, the
Right.
reaction of the dog's dominant behavior or communication. um, you know that's how I would more describe that, because it can flip, right? It just depends on who ends up getting access to that resource,
Hmm.
and each could be using dominant behaviors. It doesn't mean either dog is dominant at that point, and I would actually not label either dog dominant at any
Right.
point. Um, so hope that makes
Well,
sense.
yeah, because so yeah, because the thing is, it's like you might have a dog that might go up and take a bone from another dog, and that
Mhm.
dog's like whatever, and
Yeah.
it's not, it's they don't care about it, right? It's not
Mhm.
as important. Versus if they go, that same dog does it to another dog that maybe might not be find that
Yeah.
great. That's what I mean. It's like we have this expectations that all dogs should get along, and it's like no, because some dogs it'll be fine, and some
Yeah.
dogs it won't,
Well,
right?
Yeah.
people don't get along, so
That's what
how
I
do
was
you
saying,
expect
Lisa. I was just
dogs?
gonna say that. I was
Like
like, yeah, when all people
the
start getting
higher
along, then we'll assume all dogs can get along.
right.
So,
Exactly. So there was a couple of comments in here.
mhm.
Shannon, I witnessed a Doberman bite a trainer using the Keeler method when I was a kid. I was on the side of the dog. It was awful for the dog. Obviously, I think we've all kind of seen some horrific things that people will do to dogs in the name of training. Um, and then, Beth Unser wrote, I have a 2-year-old working giant schnauzer. I've had a hard time to socialize her very much. She's very confident, but she barks and barks at people. The last weekend, she bit my brother in the butt twice. Not a bad bite, just a nip. I use a shock collar, but I feel it makes things worse. She has a European Shih Tzu pedigree. Is there anything I can do to get her used to people without putting them in a bad situation? Yes.
Yeah, great question, Beth, and thanks for sharing the case about your Schnauzer. It's been a little bit. They're not so popular in the Northeast where I am, but I've
They're
definitely
popular
have
here.
worked with a
Mhm.
handful of Schnauzers over the years. So a couple considerations here is that you have it sounds like from a working line, so Schutzen pedigree. So you have sometimes a combination of things going on here. So I'll give you an example. If there hasn't been as much socialization, she could be like, I'm not feeling very safe around these people. So there's that. And because she's around 2 years old there. So in the early stage, she can be like, I'm a little bit nervous around people. And I'm going to let them know because I'm a schnauzer and I can do this. And I'm kind of equipped with the tools and mechanics to do this.
Right.
And so some of that working line could be coming out. And that makes for an interesting case because it can look like a lot of confidence because the dog's like, I'm like a Malinois, I'm like a Schnauzer, I'm like a livestock guardian dog. This is in my genetics to make this kind of display to keep something bad away.
Hmm.
And so sometimes it can be confusing. Like, is my dog fearful? Are they confident? Are they nervous? Like, what is going on? And typically with under socialized dogs, they can be a little bit more nervous and fearful of people. So the goal here for me would be to build more confidence. And the way to think of that is kind of think of the opposite side of the equation here. So if we're trying to stop the bad behavior, what is it going to take to build the desirable behavior and to change the association? And if you think about if you use sometimes I'm sure you're doing things like reinforcing things, like when you ask her for a sit, you give her a cookie. So same thing can be done when you have a dog that has issues with people or aggression or showing aggressive behaviors. Start to think about what behaviors you want instead of the growling, snarling, lunging, and all those things, and start to reinforce those behaviors. Can you just look at a guy at the distance and I can mark and reinforce that? Can you just see Uncle Bob coming through the front door and without having any kind of display? And can I reinforce that behavior? And guess what happens then? It's a process called classical conditioning, where your dog will start to learn, that guy was pretty safe because my mom kept me at a great enough distance, so it's safe for me at this time. And I'm getting treats every time I see that person. I get treats when Uncle Bob comes through the front door, and I get treats when this one approaches and that one approaches. Pretty soon, that helps to build the confidence, or what's missing right now is the actual confidence around people, because she's not going to be as fearful or under socialized around those people. Now, the goal is to, of course, set things up so you're at a distance, at a great enough distance, and the thing is not doing anything at a level of intensity that's too scary, and you keep the duration of each session short enough. Those are the three variables we can always control: is distance, duration, and intensity. And if you control those three things, it doesn't matter which dog you have. I've worked with
Hmm.
worst of the worst dogs. There's always a distance, a duration, intensity we can modify as the trainers to help that dog be successful and to continue to build on those successes. So your dog sees the thing, we mark and reinforce, and we just rinse and repeat. Try to get like 40 to 50 treats out in that 5 to 10 minute session, and then call it a day. And each time you're going to be able to get a little closer, and that
Yep.
person's going to be able to do more things, like I'm talking with my hands or giving direct eye contact. You start to build in those things. So that way you don't have to worry about suppressing any of the undesirable behavior. You go to, let's teach you what to do instead, because that's really what's going to help your dog feel better, is pairing positive associations with the things that she has issues with now, versus just trying to suppress it around the things she has issues with now. We want to help her feel better about those things.
Right. And many times with those type of situations, real change, and this is for people too. Uh,
Take time.
Real change comes from the inside out.
Mhm.
It's very hard. If I go, you need to change your eating habits. You have to want to change those eating habits. We can't make you do it. You
Absolutely.
change
Yeah.
how you feel about the people, the dog, the whatever the
Mhm.
situation is. Um, you have to work it where you change from the feeling from the inside out.
Yeah, well, that's a really good point, Nancy, because one way to think about it is when we're seeing aggression or aggressive behaviors like the barking, lunging, growling, biting behaviors, those are symptoms.
Yeah.
And just like when somebody's sneezing, coughing, or is hurting, those are symptoms of something going on. And when we're talking about behavior issues like separation anxiety or aggression, there's an underlying cause that we need to be focusing on. We focus on the cause, then the symptoms go away. So
Right.
for a dog like Beth's dog, if we help a giant schnauzer, we address the cause, which is possibly fear or under socialization around people. If we address that cause, then the symptoms go away, because now Beth's schnauzers and be like, I don't feel unsafe around people anymore. I actually feel good about them because they're always predicting good things. And mom has kept me safe as we're working through this process of me feeling more comfortable around people. So you address the cause, the symptoms go away, and you don't have to worry about the barking, lunging, growling. You help the dog feel less fearful or less painful or less anxious.
Right.
Well,
And,
this and I think I'm sorry, I just wanted to jump in on this, but
yeah.
what I think what's also critical is that when you're working with this situation, we kind of underestimate the amount of emotion or the quality of the emotion the dog's feeling. We underestimate that, and I also think that most people want to hurry up and get through it. so they don't take the necessary steps. I mean, in your cases, in your worst aggressive case for a dog of this situation, barking at somebody from a position away, a distance away, how long did it take to work in that case? Like it can take anywhere from X to Z, right? How long
Yeah.
ever it takes.
Yeah, and it's always you got to ask the question. You have to ask the dog,
Right.
how long is
Right.
this going to take you? Like, how long do you need? How
Yeah.
long do you need? What do you need for me to do to make you feel comfortable? Because it can take anywhere from 30 seconds. I've had dogs that are completely fearful of people, and if you do the right things, they're like one trial learning. They call it like, all right,
Right.
this person's safe, so everybody else on this property is safe, and that's usually dogs that are new to the home or new to the
Right.
area. You have a little luxury of setting up a new environment, but in some dogs it can take many months or even years to make any
Years.
changes.
Mhm.
So it all depends on the dog, and it's our goal is to just be part of that dog's journey rather than having this end goal or end thing we're always focused on. We want to be present in that journey so we can be present for the dog to help them the most.
Right. Uh, so Kathy has her niece adopted a 5-month-old mixed breed.
Hmm.
She's that's the third home since it's been, and it growls at people when people enter the room. And here's the thing, I think, and this is you, I've seen this a lot. Sometimes we focus on, oh my God, it's growling, and we make such a big deal out of it that it just sometimes the dog just needs to decompress.
Hmm.
Some of the making those positive associations, especially on a young dog, would probably go pretty quick. Um, and but getting all worried about it and bringing the attention with any kind of verbal correction or whatever, bringing all that attention to it actually makes it worse.
Make it worse. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean it's a normal human response. Like if we see a dog or any animal threatening us, we're gonna have mixed reactions. We might say knock it off. We might yell at the animal. We might try to, all kinds of different human responses we might have. But the way to think about growls is, um, this is hard for people to do. I know it. Like if a dog growls at you, obviously we want to take offense to it because like how dare you growl at the hand that feeds you, right? But
Yes, right.
but at the same, it's hard to shift to the mindset of I'm actually going to be like, thank you,
Yeah.
thanks for growling at
Not
me
biting me.
because it's better than biting, right? I'll take it all day long over biting. We love growls because analogy you might use, you walk into a place, a public spot, and you got some guy with a gun. Instead of shooting everybody, he says, all right, as long as you don't get any closer to me, I'll let you go. You just walk away. I've got the gun here, and I'm letting you know, don't get any closer. And you have the opportunity to actually walk away and do nothing. Versus the guy that just starts shooting without any kind of warning, right? It's the same
Hmm.
thing what the dog is doing, saying, "Hey, as long as you don't get any closer, I'm letting you know loud and clear that your
Right.
approach is threatening." And to my resource in this case possibly, or maybe to the dog's self, but it's dogs it's great that the dog's growling because it's communication. What happens in cases where it gets difficult is when people punish the growl and they start yelling
Hmm.
or they do other things to the dog, and the dog's like, okay, I won't growl anymore, I guess, oh, because I don't like that, I don't get getting yelled at, I don't like getting having this punishment directed at me. So I won't growl anymore, but I'm still not feeling okay. And I still really like this bone or this food or this resting spot or whatever it is, or I'm still fearful of you. So I won't growl anymore. I'll just wait till you get close enough and then I'll bite you. So you eventually see this escalation in
Hmm.
intensity and comments like, oh, it happened out of the blue. But actually, it's because their warning signals are being suppressed more and more to where they're like, none of this is working. I'm trying to get people to move away, but they're not listening. So I'm just gonna bite. That works because most people don't stick around if a dog's biting them. So
Yes.
biting almost always works to make people go away. Growling, not always, unfortunately.
Yeah. And
So in Kathy's case, yeah, decompression, name of the game. Like all dogs, I think should, and I learned this with my foster dogs. It took me some time to figure this out, but they don't need all this training and all these, things to begin with. They need to just feel safe. And so the best thing, all dogs, not just dogs that are showing some low level signs of aggression, is they should have a safe space in their home, just a place they can escape to. Because when you think about it, most
mhm.
dogs don't have a spot in their home where they can go where they know they can be completely undisturbed. We have it as humans. We have our bedroom. Some of us use our bathroom to escape, but whatever, you know. We have places where we can go and be like, nobody's gonna bother me here. This is my private space. So dogs should have the same, so they can decompress. Be like, I can chill here. This place is safe, and nobody's bothering me, and I can have my toys in here, and I got this comfy bed, and I'm starting to feel this environment. This is my new home. I feel safe here. So, especially a 5-month-old, I'd be like, let's give this dog at least a few weeks. I mean, doing the typical daily routine, making things predictable, feeding the dog, giving the dog exercise, but really a lot of just hands off, kind of like just settle in. Nobody's going to bother you for now. Kids aren't going to come over and harass you.
Right.
Uncle Bob's not going to come over and just say hello. Like all these things to be reduced to help that dog just settle in. I think it's important for all dogs to have that.
Well, you usually see that, right, with the rescue dogs, where everyone's like, "I want to hurry up and make their life complete," and I'm like, "No, slow down."
And that's and there's nothing wrong with like wanting to spoil our dog. Of course, we're like, oh my gosh, like it just got this shiny new thing in our home. But we do have to give them the space, and I've seen it so many times. My own Doberman, the one you see in the picture back there, his first few weeks. There's nothing more, because we let our dog sleep in the bed. So there's nothing more scary than a 90-pound Doberman waking up from sleep and like air snapping and trying to kill something, waking up out of his sleep. There's nothing more scary than that. Like I would wake up one morning, I'm like, whoa, like. So we obviously had to manage that when we discovered it. But just by giving, we did nothing. I did nothing. No training, no special behavior, change strategy, nothing. We just let him settle in, and the behavior went away. A few weeks of just settling in, that kind of sleep startle response, I think was very much stress related, his new environment. So we just gave him his own spot, and after a few weeks, we did nothing else. It went away. So my poor little dog, I had this little dog Izzy too, and she would not be really happy about that. You get a 90-pound Doberman like this 10-pound min pin pug mix. Like, what is this? What is going on? Because he would do it to her too for some reason, but he would just kind of do that. Fortunately, he didn't bite anybody, because that would have been bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we have two questions that are kind of go together. One, Beth, is there any such thing as genetically determined, like genetically, and I would say, yeah. And the other one is Joyce mentioned if there's any correlation between dogs that are maybe taken away from their moms too early, or away from their lure mates too early, that would increase their potential of being aggressive.
Yeah, so I'll give two separate answers here. So yes, there's a genetic component. We always want to consider genetics in any behavior, not just aggression, because we've selected for, as humans, we've bred certain dogs to do certain tasks. So using that livestock guardian dog example, or the Schutzen, working line Schutzen dogs that we were just talking about, or really any dog that's been selected for using aggressive behaviors to do their work. So when we've done it with many different dogs of many different breeds, and to get a little geeky, it all boils down to what's called the predatory motor sequence that exists in all dogs. All dogs have some part of the predatory motor sequence, that eye, stalk, chase, bite, grab, bite, kill, all that stuff that happens in that sequence. All dogs have it when you think about it. And like if you think about your border collie, we've really exaggerated the eye and the stalk, and then just a little bite sometimes, but most of the time they don't go to the kill and the kill bite and all that stuff.
And
of
the
course,
dissect and all that, yeah.
And then pit bulls, for instance, have a lot of the initial parts of the chain sort of suppressed, and we selected for the grab and bite type of behaviors. So genetics definitely play a role. Now, there are definitely anomalies in breeds. You get some dogs that do not meet the standard at all when it comes to behavior. And in fact, it's actually really hard to get the standard that we're looking for sometimes, or our expectations. So, but that's just going to tell us what the dog's style of aggressive responses typically look like. And then also things like I was talking about, like tenacity, and like terriers, more intensity in the behaviors. So yeah, it's something to consider, but it certainly doesn't mean we can't help all dogs. All dogs can live a better quality of life. We just have to remember, we understand like what a Belgian Malinois was initially selected for in their breeding. And it's and vice versa. Sometimes you see like people want something unrealistic in dogs. Like I want my Cavalier King Charles Spaniel to do protection work. Probably not.
No.
or the dog's protecting me. I think the dog's just protecting me. They
Yeah,
get that a
right.
lot too.
And
Probably not.
yeah, because that is it's true. It's one of those things that um the the what you we get a lot of calls of people that have herding breeds that are nipping the
Mhm.
children. I'm like, well, but you
Normal
do,
behavior. Yeah,
yeah,
and they'll, "Oh, he's gonna eat the children." Probably not, but, it's obviously not nice. It's not a desirable behavior, so but it's a different type of response. Yeah, and then, c like, going back to Beth's case, you might see some protection going on with a Schnauzer. That's something else to consider, is there's true protective behavior happening. Again, it's rare. It's not too many dogs will
right.
actually do that, but could be going on in that case. And then the other one was about separating dogs from the litter, or dogs pulled from the litter too early. Usually, that's a function of lack of social skills,
Yes.
because mama dog's not there to teach puppy what to do, and puppy's not learning
Hmm.
it. Puppies learn so much in that initial 7 to 8 weeks from their litter mates. How to inhibit their bite, how to communicate in certain ways, how to work out a resource. So when they start feeding and then nursing, of course, they're working out access to those resources, and they learn to not have to fight at a high level to get access to the resources most of the time. In some cases, you actually see dogs develop high level resource guarding because of the limitation of resources. So it can affect it. So dogs, yeah, taken from the litter, it usually has an impact on that, as the social skills they're learning with litter mates or their mom.
Hmm. And sometimes you can, sometimes if you're able to mitigate it with giving them, if you get them early enough, give them some good social
Yep.
interaction early on, and
Yep. No
so
better teachers than other socially adept
Yep. Yep.
adult
dogs,
dogs, usually.
not the dog part, people.
Exactly. And
So
not a free for all puppy class either.
Right.
nope.
Puppy classes are good, but yeah, we don't want free for all. Like, it's like letting toddlers teach each other
Yep.
Exactly.
skills, right? It's
There's
like, you
gotta
guys go ahead. And here's a bunch of swords and stuff you can play with at the same time.
be,
So
here's a,
Lauren Schreier. So it would be helpful if we looked at any label, aggression, dominance, etc., as
Mhm.
behavior, and behavior is linked to emotion, ritual, and/or habit, and then evaluate how to manage from there.
Couldn't say any better,
yep,
Lauren.
that's
Yes,
it.
yes,
Nice job.
that's exactly it. Just let's look at behavior, look at the environment, look at the emotions, look at underlying medical issues, the causes, the reasons for behavior. Then you don't have to label it. You
Right.
don't
Yep, you
never
just
actually
deal
have to
with
call it anything.
yeah, you just deal with what you have,
Hmm.
what you're looking at, and that's pretty challenging as a trainer these days, because it's like, oh well, he's a this, and I can't tell you how many. Well, he's a this kind of dog. He's a that kind of dog. It's like, no, it's I have the most unshepherded shepherd in the world. He is he has doesn't have a protective bone in his body. He's the only thing he does to have a shepherd is he barks, but he doesn't bark at other dogs. He loves other dogs. He loves people. He thinks the world's a wonderful place. Life is wonderful. Everybody needs to love him, which is not what you typically
Normal. It's not
normal.
typical. Yeah.
It's not typical, but he's what he is, right? Um,
But you also, I mean, and that's the other thing too. Like, don't, I mean, we can't negate the fact that when we go in looking for a dog, we can select for specific temperament traits, not just the genetic component of what that dog is, but also there's certain things you're going to see with dogs. Sociability, you're going to see, right? So there's
Yep.
certain traits that you'll see that you're like, I like that. And I honestly, speaking of all that stuff, I honestly wish more people would actually consult somebody who understood behavior and that whole aspect of it, not just
Yeah.
training, who was able to help select appropriate dogs, because I think that would help dogs stay in homes. Plus, people will get more of what they want.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
by the grace of God, they're still with us, right? The tough
Yeah.
ones. But
Yeah.
so here, this is a trainer question. Deb asked, "What at what point?" And I can tell you my answer. And Lisa has her. Everybody has their different point. At what point do you walk away from a case that's the handler
Hmm.
um, is not doing is not oh, God, what's the word that I'm losing the word
compliance.
Yeah, they're not
yeah,
putting in the
they're
work.
not complying and they're not doing it. So at what point, what do you say? Or
Yeah.
when do you decide that, okay, we're done?
I think that's a great question, Deb. It's nice to see you here. It's important for trainers to really think about that ahead of time, because that's going to
Mm,
happen. It happens to all of us, especially in aggression cases. So for aggression cases, it's fairly straightforward for me. It's when I feel that there's too much risk in the case and the client's not taking it seriously enough.
mhm.
If there's imminent risk to another dog or to a child or to another human. I will let them know that and let them know that they really need to take the management side at least seriously enough. Um, that's one of the reasons I'll stop working with a case, because of the risk. And then the number two is my own mental health. So I don't want to have a string of cases that it's like failure after failure after failure, because
Yes.
I know I could do certain things with the dog if it were my dog, but the client's not doing the work. Now, of course, we can't set the same expectations for our clients as like a dog living with us, but if they're just putting in no work at all, at the bare minimum, that can take its toll on us as trainers and consultants. We do not want to be at 80-20, right? We're putting 80% of the work in, they're putting 20% of the work, because that's the fastest road to burnout. You're going to really
Right.
Mhm.
say like, I'm done. So try to think of like a 51-49. Be like, I'll put in 51% of the effort. I need 49% in return from the client, and fill your caseloads with cases like that. The cases that aren't doing it, the best thing to do is just like, listen, when you're ready to for your next session, shoot me a text or give me a call and we'll put it on the books. And guess what? You never hear from those people again because
Yeah.
they're already given up, or they already kind of resigned to what they have, or they're just not dedicated to the case.
Mhm.
So
And,
um,
and sometimes, Mike, have you found that some of the very challenging cases, sometimes people know the answer,
yep.
and sometimes they just need permission to make this certain decisions, right?
Yes. Yep. And
Uh,
that's what we're there for as the professionals. Sometimes we have to realize that the client may have already made a decision to rehome or seek behavioral euthanasia or just manage things, or so they have their decision already made. We're there to help them feel better about the decision, because we're giving them the objective components to look at in their case. Be like, yes, this is probably the right decision in your case. So we're not making the decision for them. We're just being the professional there with the experience and the knowledge of, yeah, these are things to consider, and probably some additional considerations as well that we can educate them on, so that they can make the informed decision themselves. And that in itself can be success in a case, because you are giving them the knowledge they need to kind of sleep better at night and know they're making the right decision for their potentials, for their actual situation.
right. Because that unfortunately all of us have had to deal with that. In that situation, where that the client knows that that's the answer,
Mhm.
and broaching that, that sometimes this dog's not okay and it's not happy, and there's limits to what we can do to help him
Mhm.
have a quality life, and sometimes that's what you know that's the answer. So that's it's one of those it's difficult, but it's sometimes we as trainers need to give them that permission, like it's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's it's
So
okay.
along those lines, let me ask, how, in because you deal with purely aggression behavior, how what is it now? Do you find a difference in times? Because I'm always interested. Like way back when you started, how many
Mhm.
truly when you started getting into this, how many really bad or dogs that like so to me like dogs that want to bite people are extremely high risk, and even with training it's pure management. I had one, Nancy knew him. I
Mhm.
had a dog who wanted to bite other dogs. I managed it the duration of his life, but
Mhm.
I'm not the average person with having multiple dogs and management and so forth. So truly, for my dog biting person, if something ever happened to me, I told my husband he needs to be euthanized
Mhm.
because he is not safe, and I would rather know what happens to him rather than
Mhm.
if I send him off and hope for the best, right?
Yeah.
And because people are not nice when they deal with aggression, true aggression, and they
Yeah.
try to do
Mhm.
some pretty extreme training that it's not, to me, it's not humane. But um, my question to you is, have you been a witness or anybody who's been involved in cases where there has been severe bites,
Mhm.
number one, and two, what is the going cost of something of that nature if somebody's found a dog is dangerous or needs to pay damages and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I've done some expert witness work, and these are usually very high, like bad cases, somebody mauled, spending
Oh, wow.
multiple surgeries, those kind of cases. So the costs, the average dog bite lawsuit in the U.S. right now, this is statistics from I think 2021 or 2022. The insurance companies haven't released the last couple of years, but it's gone up since I started giving lectures and talks 10 years ago on this topic. Is about 18,000 was 10 years ago. Now it's up to $64,000. I imagine it's higher than that now. It's the
Mhm.
number one homeowners insurance claim that's happening.
So you
Uh,
said it's how much again? 50,000?
64,000 is the
64.
average.
Oh,
The
okay. So it's
cases
gone
that
up.
I've worked on are in the 300,000 to a million to $2 million range easily.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, it can get really, like, it was just working on a case that, yeah, there was close to $2 million settlement. So, um, and I don't even think that was enough for the injuries that this person suffered. But so yeah, but just to quell any concerns here, those are the far and few between cases. If you look at all dog bite statistics, statistically less than 0.1% of bites are going to result in that kind of case.
Mhm.
80% of bites that happen don't require medical care. So it's something you can wash out at home, or just, there's very little scrape or anything like that. And then about 19% are in there was, slight puncture kind of cases. So it's rare to actually see those high level kind of cases.
Right. So really quickly, I know we can talk, we can go on and on for hours, but when do you decide? Because in a lot of
Mhm.
our medical, our aggression cases, sometimes the answer is they need medication to help
Mhm.
through the process
Yep.
um,
Yeah.
getting them, helping the dog get better and be able to, uh, modify their behavior with a little bit of help from meds. So, at what point do you decide? Because usually it's when the anxiety is so severe that
Yeah.
you have to fix that.
Yeah, it's so it comes with time and experience in cases. You start to get more and more of a feel as you continue seeing enough cases. But there's a really great article by Suzanne Clothier out there. It's called the Three Ps,
Yes.
and looks at
You
provocation,
know it.
proportion, and persistence,
Yep.
and determining what medication, when medication might be an option. So just Google Suzanne Clothier Three Ps article, and it'll come right up for you.
Yeah.
So it's a good starter article, and you're looking at things like if the dog is not responding to the behavior change strategies we're using. Maybe we've been using a bunch of different techniques and things and nothing's working. Or the dog is not taking food at all because it's so stressed out, or the stress is impacting the dog's health. The dog's starting to lose its coat color, and things are happening to the dog because of chronic stress. Sometimes dogs are in such profound states of fear or anxiety, they need something to help them cope with the world. You might look at situational meds sometimes too, so
Mhm.
things that are given to the dog before they go to that thing. And that's especially true in like city environments and places where it's difficult to control the distance. So sometimes
Mhm.
you're like, this dog needs help in this particular environment for now. And sometimes the intensity of the behavior doesn't match, like a dog that's guarding their food bowl, right? They might be like, "Arr," and somebody
Yeah.
approaches from 5 feet away. Normal, very
Right.
normal looking guarding. But a dog that like leaves the food bowl to charge across the house to attack Uncle Bob because he's coming through the front door, that is disproportionate. Just like this high level response, and the dog's not responding to any stimuli to try to stop that. That's another case that might be responding to medication. So lots of different reasons. It boils down to the nuances of the case, the age of the dog, the breed of dog, the owner situation. So many variables in considering it. But bottom line is medication can be very, very helpful in some cases. Not all cases, just like
Yeah.
anything else, but can
Yep.
be very, very helpful. So when people are hesitant, like, oh, I don't want to medicate my 4-month-old puppy or my 14-year-old dog, it's almost always better to say, let's try it to see, because
Mhm.
most of the time it's going to improve their quality of life. You're going to see changes.
Right.
Sometimes you, of course, have to experiment. You have to try different things, but,
As a
usually
matter of
there's
fact,
some
another
positive.
trainer reached out to me this morning about two young puppies that are growling, whatever. And it's like I said, starting them on meds earlier is better than later. They're really scared
Yep.
and worried and in the back of the
Yep.
so actually Dr. Overall was the one I saw her many
Mhm.
years ago, and she said the earlier you start them, the better off they are because you can probably get them off the meds at some point.
Mhm.
You know what I
Yep,
mean? Versus if you wait and have those neural pathways form, it's
exactly.
it takes so much longer to get.
Well, the brain is more right. The brain is more pliable. Ultimately,
Mhm.
more flexibility, and neuroplasticity. So like, and that's always been the concern, right? Like when do you step in? Because you really want to
Mhm.
not when you're managing or you're preventing rehearsal of behaviors we don't
Yeah.
want. And I think that's like people think it's or when you do about like when you do a distraction, well they call it a distraction, but like if you take cookies and toss them on the ground to get the
Mhm.
dog to get away from it, people call those distractions. Or you're giving a cookie. I hear that a lot. Like when you give them
Yeah.
techniques to work with, they're like, oh, well, okay, yeah, the distraction works. I'm like, no, no, no. It's not a distraction. It's helping the dog make a choice. But
Yeah.
I think the neuroplasticity is, I think, really important. Like Nancy said, yes, you can do early stuff, but you really have to have a veterinarian that works, behavior veterinarian that really works with it.
Yeah.
It's
Exactly.
so tricky. So, with that, do you work with anyone specifically, or do you have a network of?
I'm lucky in my position because I have like about half of the veterinary behaviors in speed dial.
Nice.
Like that, there's about 100 and
That's
I think
good.
a little over 100 of them in the U.S. and around the
Nice.
world, and I know most of them personally, just because I've been able to meet all of them in my travels, or I work with them, or I do conferences and lectures with some of them. So I'm super fortunate in that regard. But it takes time. You need to build up a network of veterinarians you trust, and
Mhm.
usually for trainers, I say you got to put in that work to like make those connections, interview the vets until you find a few that you're very comfortable
Yeah.
referring to, so you have that referral source for your clients. I think
Right.
it's
Right.
part of our job, really.
Right, it's true, yeah, and now I'm finding some of the more younger vets are a little bit more open to the 'cause we've had,
Slowly but surely, yeah.
yeah, we've had a
Yeah.
couple of, clients that have a more, ma older vets, and they don't wanna put the dog
Mhm.
on meds.
Yep.
So it's like, but the dog needs it, and it's hard because, "Oh, my dog trainer said so." They're like, "Who are they?" Right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but it seems like the younger vets coming up now are a lot more open to it, and they're more
Hmm.
interested in it, and so it's easier to make those connections with
Yep.
some of the younger ones that would be willing to help out, clients or whatever.
Hmm.
All right, we've gone over time, so let's get to the nitty gritty. Mike will be here for your canine in Elmhurst on June 22nd and 23rd. There's still spots available to sign up. We will put the link on the. So he's going to be doing a full day of talking about aggression and about defensive handling and dog to dog behavior. So I've already been to Mike's workshop, and I'm so excited to see him again because you it's like you always gain new knowledge no matter how long you've been doing it.
Yeah.
And so there it's in the chat
Chat.
there, the link. Also, oh my gosh, what I was gonna say. Oh, also, and Mike, your workshop, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's for all. It's for dog trainers, it's for pet owners, it's for everyone that's interested in learning more about aggression and defensive handling, which is, really really important. Am I is that oh
Yeah. Yeah. And I like to structure it. I always ask who's there when I get there, and like just so I can custom tailor it to the audience. But and I try to keep things simple. Yes, we'll get into some more advanced and deep dive stuff, but I try to keep it very simple so it's understandable to everybody. So
Yeah, so if you're a dog trainer or if you're I found it very helpful, and again, and I flew to Georgia to see Mike, so that's when I finally decided, oh, okay, we need to bring him here, to kind of educate us here in the Midwest. Also, Mike, you also have a master class on aggression, as well. Can you talk a little bit about that?
sure, it's a course that I launched a few years ago, but takes you soup to nuts, start to finish on working aggression cases. So I originally designed it for trainers and consultants, but then I had some pet guardians reach out, be like, "Should I take this course? Can I take this course?" I'm like, "Well, it's designed for trainers," but now I've had tons of pet guardians come to, and they do it to help their own dog, so they learn about whether it's a dog to human aggression case or dog to dog aggression situation, or both. They learn some tools and techniques to help themselves as well. So happy to see that happening, and that can be all fun. You can find all of this stuff on my website, aggressivedog.com. I've got tons of free videos and articles, and I also have the course information, webinars, free stuff, podcasts. I mean, so if you're into aggression, I got you. It's all
Yeah,
there.
and even if you may not have a dog, it's really when we are all more knowledgeable about dogs, we can help each other, right?
Yes.
We can help each other understand, not label the other people's dog and help those people with their situation. So even if you're currently not dealing with that situation, you know, just learning and getting better at it is so helpful. How did you get? Oh, somebody asked how you got involved. Through shelter work, like most of us did. And he actually addressed it at the beginning. All right, all. Thank you for tuning in tonight. Appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you here at the workshop or online at some point. And thank you, Mike, for. Uh,
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.